So here I'm sitting in this lovely warm lab, and just outside is the environment that Scott and Shackleton first faced when they came here about 100 years ago. Unlike Scott and Shackleton, who viewed the ice as this sort of static monster that had to be crossed to get to the South Pole, we scientists now are able to see the ice as a dynamic living entity that is sort of producing change, like the icebergs that I study. For me, it's been a wild ride. First of all, I found out that the iceberg that I came down to study not only was larger than the iceberg that sank the Titanic, it was not only larger than the Titanic itself, but it was larger than the country that built the Titanic. That's pretty big. This is B-15. So what we see here is the White Cliff. It's about 150 feet tall. So that means that there's over 1,000 feet of ice below the waterline. This iceberg is so big that the water that it contains would run the flow of the River Jordan for 1,000 years. It's so big that the water that is inside of it would run the River Nile for 75 years. This is a little bit of video that we shot when we were flying up to the iceberg. It looks big and it looms above us. Even if we're on an aircraft flying above the iceberg is always above us. It's above us because it's a mystery that we don't understand. Here's a picture of what it looked like once we had arrived in the center of the iceberg. We put out our instruments. Now we're going to have an opportunity to monitor how the iceberg drifts north. They're so big, there's an element of fear. We don't know really what's going to come ahead when they eventually begin to melt in the ocean beyond Antarctica. What we're seeing now here is a time-lapse sort of animation of satellite imagery of the sea ice and of the continent of Antarctica. And what you see are three shades of gray. This sort of lighter shade of gray is the sea ice. And these little bits and pieces here, these are Titanic icebergs. This little fellow right here, he's not a very big iceberg compared to these other ones, but that guy there might be the size of the island of Sicily in the Mediterranean. It's like a little tiny bumblebee zipping around in a circle, happy to be in the warm waters as it's drifting north. I'd be happy to see Antarctica as a static, monolithic environment, a cold monolith of ice, sort of the way the people back in the past used to see it. But now, our comfortable thought about Antarctica is over. Now we're seeing it as a living being that's dynamic, that's producing change that it's broadcasting to the rest of the world, possibly in response to what the world is broadcasting down to Antarctica. Certainly on a gut level, it's going to be frightening to watch what happens to these babies once they get north.
What environment would the men of Shackleton's expedition encounter if they returned in the next life? Shackleton, seen here, would finally make it to the pole, a quest he had to abandon a mere 100 miles short of it. Would there be any ice left? Would he have to construct an artificial Antarctica in a studio and try to find his route through papier-mâché icebergs? Would our only modern recourse be to create ice with machines?
This is Frosty Boy here in McMurdo. It's the equivalent of ice cream in the States, and it's a really big hit. Everybody loves it. It's what they go for 3 or 4 times a day, and it has the texture of ice cream, but it's not quite ice cream. There's a lot of crises that happen in McMurdo when the Frosty Boy runs out. It's bad news. Words circulate everywhere throughout McMurdo when Frosty Boy goes down. It's really good stuff.
From the very first day, we just wanted to get out of this place. McMurdo has climate-controlled housing facilities, its own radio station, a bowling alley, and abominations such as an aerobic studio and yoga classes. It even has an ATM machine. For all these reasons, I wanted to get out into the field as soon as possible. But before we could do that, it is mandatory that every inhabitant of McMurdo attends survival school before being allowed to leave. This 2-day exercise is called Happy Camper. Students learn to build survival trenches and igloos. The bad news is that night you have to sleep in your own construction.
As long as I end up with 10 fingers and 10 toes at the end, it's all good.
Oh God, sorry.
We always need to break ourselves into 2 different groups now. We're gonna brief this group over here for the burning vehicle scenario first. Then we're gonna come back over and we're gonna brief the bucket head whiteout scenario for everybody else. Essentially, we're trying to create conditions where we wouldn't be able to see. The wind is so severe, the snow is blowing so severely, very, very cold. Exposed skin might actually create frostbite instantaneously. The winds are so severe you could be blown off of your stance of just simply standing out. And visibility is pretty much none. You can't see flag to flag. You might not be able to see your hand in front of your own face. Therefore, what we're going to do as a simulator is incorporate a bucket to simulate a whiteout condition to a point where I can barely hear myself. You can't necessarily even hear me. And I certainly can't see any of you right now. So that's the whole idea behind the bucket head, is to actually be a whiteout simulator. And it works really quite well. So, some of the parameters for this are going to be, we're going to start inside the sea ice hut. I said I was going to go to the bathroom. And in fact, I did. I needed to go to the bathroom, right? So I've gone out. I've been gone for quite some time now, though. You know, like 10, 15, all of a sudden 20 minutes. You're like, First off, where's the chocolate? Second off, where's Kevin?
Are you with us, number 1?
Number 1 is up.
The goal is clear: to find the instructor next to the outhouse.
Number 2's out. Number 3 out. Number 3 out.
All right, number 1, you're gonna have to walk in one simple direction, and I'm gonna keep the rope. Pull on one rope for me.
4 out.
It looks pretty good. They seem to be heading in the right direction.
5 out. 6 out.
But very soon the front man veers off course, pulling everyone else with him.
Somebody on the
Hey, anybody out there? I'm here, number 3's here. Where you at, number 2?